Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Car MBS Pod Breakfast. My name is Sam Abu Hamdan. I'm the Senior Director for North American Automotive at Eris Corporation, and I'll be moderating this session this morning, which is titled Managing the Engineering Technology Laggard Syndrome. So technology, as you all know, is evolving. It evolves every day, all the time. Also, market needs changes as well. So for us to stay competitive and in this marketplace, we need to adapt to change. We need to adapt very rapidly. A key challenge to this throughout this process is getting our engineers to adapt to whatever new changes we throw at them. And as we all know, engineers are a special breed. They are very conservative in their approach, right? So we need to be very careful to how we use organizational change management so that we can implement this change and help us. So with us today are 4 panelists that will discuss the organizational change management, its importance, and how it could affect how rapidly we can change. We'll also discuss a technology platform that will enable that change as well. So I want to ask each one of the panelists to introduce themselves. We'll start with Robert Worthland. Robert is the Senior Technical Leader of Systems Engineering at Ford Motor Company. Robert?
Yes, thank you, Sam. I appreciate that. Just as an introduction, I've been with Ford Motor Company for just over a year. Prior to that, I was at General Motors in a similar capacity, and then prior to that, I had 21 years in the United States Air Force, working in systems engineering and program management. And I'm delighted to be here and part of the panel today.
Great, thank you, Robert. Bill Hilden is the Senior Manager of Technical Strategy, Planning and Operations at Toyota Motor Europe. Bill, could you please introduce yourself?
Hello, well, nice to meet everybody virtually. Thanks very much, Sam. So I've had about 20 years experience in both public sector and private sector, and then in a range of industries, looking at engineering, IT, and project management. When I started off in Toyota, I was that humble engineer, Sam, who was very conservative. So I was working in powertrain development at the time. And then I completed my MBA and then moved into organizational change management and strategy area. And currently I'm leading up our digital transformation activities here in Europe. So nice to meet everybody.
Great, thank you, Bill. And Richard Doak is the CTO of Automotive Suppliers at Microsoft. Richard?
Good morning, and thank you, everyone. Glad to be here. Thanks for the invite as well. So like my colleagues here, lots of years of experience working in automotive, worked at Volkswagen, GM, and Ford as well over the years. Recently joined Microsoft 3 years ago as part of this conversation as well on how to work with the automotive industries. But more importantly, I'm aligned with the suppliers on how to help them transform the companies with engineering, with the new connectivity, mobility, as well as with manufacturing 4.0. So it's been a challenge. It's been fun though, and I look forward to the conversation today.
Great, thank you, Richard. And Mark Lind, Senior VP of Strategy at Eris Corporation. Mark?
Yes, hello. Thank you, Sam, and thank you to the other panelists and everybody who's joining today's session. I'm Mark Lind, the head of strategy at Eris. I've been with the company for over a decade, driving the portfolio strategy as well as our capital strategy. For those of you who aren't familiar with Eris, we're really the disruptor in the industrial applications space with product lifecycle management and related industrial applications on a resilient platform. And the fastest growing company in the category worldwide, working with many of you in the audience probably.
Great. Thank you, Mark. Before we start, I just want to mention that the views and the comments discussed on this panel today are those personal opinions of the panelists and not necessarily the views or the opinions of the companies they're affiliated with. So with that, we can go ahead and start with our first question. And what we thought about talking first, which is the pandemic that we're going through, the whole world is going through right now. It's on everybody's mind, and I'm sure a lot of companies, big and small, had gone through some changes due to the pandemic. But this is a very good opportune moment to kind of discuss organizational change management in view of the changes that the companies have done and what could be done or have been done, so that we can share it with everybody. So the question to the panel is, how does organizational change management in engineering specifically, since probably a lot of the audience that we're talking to are affiliated with engineering and manufacturing companies. So how does the organizational change management engineering need to adapt to move more quickly in this fast changing circumstance? And we'll go ahead and start with Bill. Bill, could you take that on, please?
Yeah, so thanks very much for that, Sam. So yeah, overall as Toyota, our vision going forward is moving now from a car company to a mobility company. So what we've seen from COVID is actually we had a lot of plans in the pipeline, enabling us on that vision. And actually what we're finding now is COVID is providing an opportunity to actually accelerate a lot of those plans. If we look at then the organizational change management, I often discuss this with my teams and stuff. How is this built up? This is built up of every day we're going into the office, we're doing habits every day. These habits turn into behaviors. Then these behaviors turn into team behaviors, and they turn into organizational behaviors. So now also as a result of COVID, these habits are being broken. So now what we're focused on, and personally what I'm focused on now, is rebuilding new habits for enabling us to move to a mobility company and to take this opportunity. And as I said, we have a lot of stuff in the pipeline, and this is also coming down to how we're enabling the members, the management for more decision making. Because again, moving to mobility, central command and control doesn't work. It's going to be too heavy. Decision making is not going to be fast enough. So we need to empower the lower levels to make the appropriate decisions and have the appropriate budget constraints. And another aspect then, what I'm personally focusing then is how we're reskilling. So of course, we're asking people to change. We're setting a vision, but if we're not skilling people on how they can get there, of course, there's a lot of then confusion and uncertainty. So a big part of my job, what I see my role is creating a compelling vision, and then enabling the teams with reskilling and with empowerment in order to create their own visions that will basically align to our corporate visions. And again, as engineers, this is not something that comes naturally. We like things that are black and white. And when we come and say, please create a vision, yeah, can you show me the calculation in order to be able to do that? So a big part of my job on a daily basis is I see it as a coach. It's trying to open up the minds of our engineering management, our engineers with new tools, new skill sets, and it's fun. It's frustrating, but it's rewarding at the end. And I think these are some of the elements that I'm personally focusing on.
Good. Thank you, Bill. If I want to move over to Robert and Ford, I know Ford was one of the first companies early on to to change a lot of things and start producing PPEs or personal protective equipment gear for a lot of the kind of the first responders and the frontline workers. How would you characterize that the organization change management have in engineering also again have enabled you to move quickly?
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I think at Ford, that the examples you brought up of how Ford very quickly shifted to help produce PPE during the coronavirus pandemic, and we're continuing to do some of that. One of the things that I think was crystallized is that when you have a common vision or a common goal or something that's really focused everyone's attention. In this case, it's the extraordinary events of the past few months with this pandemic. Organizational change can happen very quickly, and I think as people have reflected on that, particularly within engineering, some of the natural resistance that I think many engineers have is natural to express is becoming more muted, or it's not as large of a concern as before, because we can point to what we've been doing in this pandemic and say, you know, in less than a week, most of us shifted from being in the office to working very productively at home. Within several days, we've been able to reestablish our networks over other means, primarily through using some of the enabling technologies, whether it's some kind of a direct or instant message platform or our email and other things. So without missing a beat, we've been able to adapt very quickly on the fly. And I think that's been one of the interesting lessons that as a company we've come to terms with, to say, you know, there's no reason why we should put on pause some of the transformational activities that we're doing, of which organizational change is one of them. And it's allowed us to have, and I think it has opened the dynamic up that has allowed us to have some very productive conversations around some new ways of doing work that even, again, 3 months ago would probably have been very difficult to get to. So I think that among the things that have had to change in the organizational, in the change perspective of organizations from an engineering perspective, was some of our managers have realized they've had to put aside some of their previous assumptions that change is very difficult, that in terms of executing that change, and also that set aside some of the preconceived notions that the resistance would be high. Now, again, coupled with that, I think, is understanding that vision or that objective was crystal clear. We had to keep working. We needed to adapt, and so it was, everyone felt invested and contributed. And so as we go forward and we do make some of these changes, we're not going to take those things for granted. We're going to emphasize that common vision. We're going to emphasize that end state. We're going to emphasize the common purpose that's driving us all forward, and then recognizing and relying upon our engineering workforce to not only understand the circumstances, but empower them and give them, you know, place in them the trust that we have to actually implement it, and to I think in some ways we look forward to them I want to use the word astonish or astound, but to impress us with their agility and their novel ideas that otherwise I think we would have tamped down or been a little bit more conservative with. So you know, I think it's a combination of both leadership as well as that combined vision that our employees need to have.
Very good. Thank you, Robert. Richard, what are your thoughts on the organization change management and engineering?
And because I work in this field with these gentlemen, I agree with Robert and Bill on don't expect implementation to change overnight. Change management is not something that's easy. You can just put a plan in place and execute on it, like building an engine, right? It's something that takes the sponsorship from the top. And here at Microsoft, we're lucky enough. That's why I left and joined Microsoft. Is it requires a culture at the executive level to push down, but it's got to be a repeat. It's got to be communication over and over and over. It cannot just be wash and rinse. It's got to be communicated. And then within that, as we've seen other types of change management in other organizations or other business strategies, succeed somewhat and then fail. The success we're seeing here is the constant pushing it down from the top, but then, as Robert said, from the bottom up as well, inviting those so that they have participation. Moreover, that they have a voice in some of the change, because otherwise they're going to fight you with the unknown. If they feel part of it and they feel that they can tell the truth, and they feel like you're going to provide them the training and the feedback so they can continuously answer those questions, they will not as much. They will not push back on you. They will actually feel like a part of it. And so culture, as we always hear from the top down, culture is also the bottom up, where as long as they feel invested and they know and understand the strategy from the top and they can relate to it and they're invited into it, then they're going to get on board and they're going to feel like it's a part of them. And I know it sounds like a wonderful story, but we've seen it actually successful. So prior to COVID, we've adopted as a culture change management across the organization, including engineering. And the one thing that COVID did do, I think, as Bill said, is it started to drive apart some of the behaviors because people started getting out of practice. So we created a high performance team management structure to bring visibility and to bring the voices back together so that there was some structure as the folks started to work. We were already a global organization, as most of us are, and will continue to be for the foreseeable future. But how do we get the global organization and those skills to still seem like they're sitting one next to each other and have a relationship like we are today here on this call? Because as we communicate with one another, then we are open to others' ideas, and then there's a better collaboration.
Very good. Thank you, Richard. Mark, I know within your job at ARIS, you deal with a lot of companies, so I'm sure you have seen a number of different organizational change managers over the years. What are your thoughts?
Well, so what we've seen in the first half of the year here really is that the pandemic has, as was stated before, become a catalyst, if you will. The digitalization initiatives, the nature of the change management that is going on because of the push to remote and work from home types of scenarios has changed the dynamic and really forced the issue of agility to the forefront. And in, whether it's our work with Bill, at Toyota, or, General Motors, Honda, their project is accelerating the work at Nissan, or, Volvo. These are all situations where we've seen the cadence, if you will, in their initiatives actually accelerate because of the pandemic situation. And it's creating a situation where managers are getting very creative. And I think, some good examples have been pointed out, and, the ability to reach and bring people along from a remote situation where it is just video interaction and trying to get the let's say mindset to reset and to recognize the necessity. Because what we've heard from, what I've personally heard from many of our largest clients, is that They believe we're in the early stages of what's unfolding here, with the pandemic continuing, but also with recessionary conditions that look as if they have the potential to be prolonged in their duration. And the ability to adapt much more rapidly than historically, because the world is changing so quickly and unfolding in front of us, and we have necessarily very little control over that. These types of let's call it organizational change techniques are more essential than ever, and really I think this topic is very timely.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mark, and everyone else for sharing your ideas and thoughts. The plan, which most of you have shared, plan for the organizational change management is great, and trying to have that in place. But I'm sure the implementation of it is always it comes with its own challenges, right? So what I would like to kind of ask you next and share with the audience is some of your biggest challenges that you have faced with your approach to implementing organizational change management. We'll start with Robert.
Yeah, sure. So I think one of the biggest challenges that we've had has been the communicating that strategy in a way that's well understood, and then also recognizing that I've never been in an implementation that works out perfectly or smoothly, and being able to adapt on the fly and communicate that change, that hey, we've learned something, or we missed this particular aspect, and so we're making a change to address it, and then again, it's always over communicate and get that buy-in from our the team members that are impacted the most by it. That and understanding the vision. I think particularly in this rapidly changing environment that we're in now, the vision is oftentimes something that people have spent a lot of time crafting. It's been through several rounds of review and tweaking. We don't have the time for that right now. And so oftentimes our vision is I'd say 80% well baked, and the other stuff hasn't just quite gelled yet. And so we're trying to communicate that it's a work in progress, and and we need to be in this together and work together, and so again, that communication I think has been the biggest challenge in my career.
That's definitely something that I've seen in a lot of companies. If you don't have the communications down, it's a big challenge for sure. Bill, I know Toyota is that mastered a lot of kind of processes and disciplines throughout the years. What are your biggest challenges in implementation of organizational change management that you've seen? Bill, are you muted?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, you just cut out. No, so thanks, Sam. I think if we look at the stats on organizational change management, they're a bit abysmal. Where you're looking at figures 15, 20, 25%. So I think all of us on the panel and in the audience, I think a lot of times we've been maybe on the potentially losing side of that than on the winning side. So I think it is a huge challenge, and I think for me, I always see the positive, and I think with whatever change you've been involved with, either as a member or as a leader, there's always a PDCA, there's always a learning that you can apply on the next loop, and there is an organizational learning associated with that. I think now what I'm finding with, so I fully agree with Robert, under communicating, that's always a key challenge. But what I'm finding more recently now is a challenge is for the operational engineering managers. So of course, I think all executive teams now are basically pushing more digitalization, mobility, case. But then on the other hand, you've got the business as usual, that basically the targets need to be best, the more current traditional vehicles need to be built, and that middle management is stuck on operations mode, and then they're also asked to say, okay, at the same time, please kind of transform. So for me, that's coming down to, again, is one of the big personal challenges I've had is, again, from a resource, from a budget, from a buy-in point of view, how to really connect with these engineering managers at a human level, and to see where there can be a win-win, where we can help you on the day-to-day engineering, which we need to make money for today, but of course we need to help you then also for the future. So we call it internally having the two samurai swords, where you're basically playing with the future and the daily operations, and that's a challenge. I can't say I have the golden bullet yet for that, but it fundamentally comes down to, again, connecting with people on a human level, understanding where their pain points, where are the struggle points, and trying to find some common wins, some win-wins there, because and basically trying to implement regular change. So that's definitely one of my challenge areas at the moment.
Got it. Thank you, Bill. Richard, have comments or opinion on this?
It seems to be the same, right? It's again, the culture. You're going to hear a lot of that, right? It's how do we get the teams to buy in? One of the things that we did in recognizing this is finding smaller. I kind of relate it back to, because we love to put technology in this, but like software development, we brought it back to sprint exercise. So we created smaller functional teams, cross-functional teams, on either a program or a product design or in a software release. But either way, it was a smaller iteration, a smaller functional team to help us, as Robert said, build that vision. But it was an iterative approach to the vision, because I agree, you can't build the big steering ship committee. It just moves too slow, and you can't get everybody to buy in. And then once you buy in, nobody wants to change it. So when we created what we call them V teams, famous for Microsoft, you hear that a lot, right? Virtual teams of different functional owners in a small group to lead a success. And that manager was a high performance manager, because we love to talk about HPM, right, for high performance management structure, to bring visibility, to allow each person to have collaborative input. And then that manager then rolls that up as a visibility to say, here are the changes we think we're making, but they don't align to the organization. And our leadership then has to adopt that and say, that's okay, not push back and say, well, you don't understand the organization then. So it's a bottom-up approach where the iteration has come from, it starts at the top, but now the bottom is pushing some of the changes upwards, and management had to learn to accept that, which is foreign, accept that when the folks from the bottom are building this collaboration and building a direction and pointing out gaps for the change process, either in the tools or in the corporate functioning, that the leadership then has to say, okay, great, now we'll go take it from there and go figure out how we can address that, or is this widespread? So we want to learn from them as they do, go through the exercises, and then adopt that and see if it's something that's corporate wide. Is that something that we should be changing as an entire organization, not just within that function? And we're starting to see faster adoption of that, because now we're seeing the next product or program team volunteer and raise their hands and say, we want to be part of the next change. And it's kind of exciting right now. And right now, because of COVID, we're seeing more folks raising their hand to be part of it. Running joke, whether it's because they got more time in their hands or they're starting to see the success of their peers. Either way, it's exciting because we're seeing them get engaged.
Very good. Thank you, Richard. It's interesting that communications and culture, which are kind of like human type traits that sometimes play a role in this. But it makes me wonder if technology has a role in this or not. And I personally believe it does, but I'd like to hear from you as well if technology plays a role in enabling an agile change. How can we, I mean, if we need to change, how rapidly can change, and how does the technology help us with this? Mark, do you want to start with that?
Sure. Well, the situation with the pandemic and COVID, really every organization's strategic plan was out the window by the end of Q1, right? And the digitalization initiatives that had been in place and moving forward at whatever pace, and meeting resistance, particularly in engineering, along the way, or taking twists and turns. What we've seen is that those have become critical enabling initiatives, and that again, this pace and agility is just become absolutely critical to success. And historically, the organizational change, when coupled with technology, has had kind of fundamental issues with respect to the employee or the participant engagement, because the teams doing the technology couldn't move quickly enough. So you had the requirements gathering and discussions about what the process would look like, and then programmers would scurry away and you wouldn't see them for a year or sometimes longer. Those types of initiatives have just been put on hold, and nobody is trying to advance their major, let's say, Team Center project, Siemens project, or the SAP 3-4 year kind of initiative right now. I mean, what we've seen is that as the inventor, if you will, of the low code platform for industrial applications, our whole premise as a company at Aras has been the necessity for agile, iterative type of engagement with the users, the people who participate in the process. So as opposed to kind of going in and finding out what they do and then leaving, what we've seen is some really creative ways people are using our technology in these types of interactive senses, where someone says, we're going to have it look like this, and then overnight it's mocked up and you're showing them something, and then they say, well, no, what I meant was. And then you're getting this even in a virtual setting where it's all remote, a much faster type of enablement for process automation, particularly in engineering, where it has been so difficult. In some cases because of, a lot of engineers are introverts. But that aside, the ability for technology to help you interact and for you to be able to show it is really what, at Aras, we think is technology's role in that type of organizational change enablement, if you will.
Yeah, so it's that collaborative environment that will help the communication and keeps things moving faster.
Yes, it's got to be interactive, especially when everybody's remote. In these kind of global digitalization types of initiatives that we work on, you're literally, you have cultural challenges, you have time zone challenges, you have the problems of communication. It's not as if you can have everybody fly in and pile into a room and hash it out on a whiteboard anymore. You're talking about, you really want to get something up, have it, you want them piloting very quickly. And that's, you know, that's what we're about enabling at Aris. I mean, that's the reason we invented the low-code platform.
Got it. Thank you, Mark. Robert, your personal experience with technology and how it played the role in enabling a faster change.
Sure. Yeah, sure. I have a lot of opinion and strong opinions about that. I think one thing that's probably frustrated me through the course of my career has been sort of what I've heard is, okay, wait a minute, you got to get the process perfect, and then we'll talk about how technology can make it work. And as I've reflected on that, it's that interactive activity that Mark has been mentioning earlier. And as I've talked about it, yes, you have to understand a bit of the process, and then you use technology and the tools to implement and to help that, but they're not. It's very difficult today to separate the two. I can't do a process without some base level of technology. Some processes cannot occur without that technology in place. Furthermore, as I've reflected on it, this iterative back and forth between developing the right process, automating those aspects of process that make sense, it's been exactly the same approach, getting the process first and then the technology, but we've accelerated it by 10 or 15 or 20 times. And so it's almost indistinguishable. I think that's what Mark was alluding to with how rapidly we need to do is the process and technology are intertwined such that it's difficult to say process first, then technology, and so on. And I think we've seen that borne out again and again with the pandemic. I think a lot of the collaborative projects that were sort of on a simmer or just kind of working their way through the process in the background were suddenly pushed to the front of priority, and they've been rolled out. And some of them have been pretty awful, honestly, but they've been continuing to iterate and move them out, and they're at a point where people, one, have learned to work around some of the issues, but also they've been able to provide that feedback quickly, and the teams that are working these have been able to deploy them and address some of those issues quickly. The second thing I think that this environment of organizational change is it has lowered the barrier or made the stovepipes between engineering and IT, for instance, a little less rigid and a lot more interactional, or sorry, wrong, not even English, a lot more interactive, and understanding that we have to rely upon each other. So I'm encouraged by what I'm seeing in this environment about the speed and the way in which both engineers and our IT partners are trying to work together to deploy innovative and solutions that actually help automate or accelerate some of our processes. I still think some of the cultural baggage that's developed over the years, particularly on the heels of well-intentioned but absolutely awfully executed initiatives, the kind that Mark described, where they get the requirements and 3 years later they come back and say, here you go. That's probably the biggest hurdle, is to overcome that immediate reaction of, oh no, here it comes again. So this is an opportunity where we can really understand how best to integrate that rapid iteration between process and iteration, and how that couples and enables organizational change.
Wonderful. Thank you, Robert. Bill, I know we just wrapped up a technology project with you. How do you feel about the technology playing a role in enabling faster and agile change?
Yeah, so I think many points from Mark and from Robert, I agree, and I think like if we look back historically, some of the biggest productivity gains that were generated through the Industrial Revolution were via automation, and I still believe that now in the future going forward, it's how can we reduce down the administration of the low value tasks that we burden our engineers with to free them up for more creativity, more higher value adding stuff. And that was one of the projects we were working on with you guys on the FPDM area. But I think what maybe before going into that, what attracted me before going into the tech with ARIS was first of all the openness of the platform, because I personally fully believe open is the way forward. These closed walls ones, you cannot be agile. You cannot be agile doing that. But I think most importantly for me, it was the common vision between me and some other key members within Toyota, and then the guys from ARIS. There was clearly an empathy, a connection where we had a common vision on how we wanted to move forward. And we've got some great visionaries within Toyota. When they started discussing technically with the ARIS guys, there was back and forward like this. It was fantastic to see. And for me, we came away after many discussions saying, actually, this is somebody we want to work with. So, but on the FPDM area, then we wanted to focus on the next step on our roadmap on the NBD development. So focusing on workflow automation, basically digital thread to be able to manage all our model generation, especially with regards to data gathering, where we still spent a huge amount of time, our engineers, please chase this decision, chase this person for this data, then managing the data in, say, not the most efficient manner, and being able to handle all the variation and complexity we need for multiple vehicles, multiple specifications and stuff. So I think that's been, I've seen being very positive. And going back to Mark's point then on the fast iteration and what Robert was saying, is that we've now we've reconfigured the teams, our internal teams working on the ARIS project to really focus on rolling it out on Scrum and on sprints. And coming back to the first question on the organizational change management and the buy-in, when we finish the sprint 2 weeks, then demoed it to the customers. The customers are coming back. Oh, can we tweak this? Can we tweak that? So that helps every 2 weeks getting that buy-in, adjusting the direction of the product, and very fast we were able to identify, okay, things are not going correctly here. We don't have enough resource in that area where they're not giving enough of the use cases in. So that's really, I think, helped us now on really a method for getting the buy-in with the engineers, and then also coming back to my time where the engineers are full also on the daily operational stuff. So we're able to find some coexistence between the daily operations and the new stuff, because it's not a huge amount of work this size. It's little mini steps we're able to adjust. So I'm quite positive on the journey we've taken so far. The journey is continuing, but I'm very positive on that, and I think we're again, from a like-mindedness and a common vision. For me, that was one of the fundamentals to be moving forward on any project.
Great, thank you very much, Bill. Richard, you of course, Microsoft is a technology company. You've been around technology for a long time. When we've worked together, but Microsoft is not just software engineers and builders, but you also build devices as well, right? So computers and Xbox and a number of other things. So what are your thoughts about how technology playing a role to rapidly implement change?
Well, no, thank you. Yeah, like my counterparts here, technology has been a key enabler. Obviously, we work at Microsoft, so we believe in technology, but we're seeing it directly from our customers. An example, COVID, right? Collaboration, everybody's talked about, is a key enabler to be able to work, not just in COVID, but also in a global engineering environment and a global smaller V team, like we like to call it, environment, where everybody's inclusive. Just an example, over COVID, we saw our team's collaboration skyrocket to 900% growth in the first 30 days. And an example of that is how Ford decided to use Teams along with our HoloLens to do engineering change design management in the field with their suppliers in real time. So that was a way to use technology to adopt a more flexible way of getting things done in a more rapid pace rather than waiting. So we're glad to see that, and I still get the suppliers asking over and over again, how can they adopt that type of mentality and change management in their own organization, and what do they need to do? I think, Robert, you said it, is not look at the big process today, but how do they take their processes and break them into smaller processes like we do with software so that they can become more agile. Unfortunately, what we've done over the years is build software around higher views of processes. We've taken a bunch of smaller processes like talk, walk, crawl, run, and we've combined that together in work. And what we now need to do is break those back apart into smaller processes of actions again, so that we can find out how to move agile across those. Maybe, as Bill said, break some of those out into automation so that you can free up the people from doing that work, like gathering requirements. Doesn't need to be a manual process. It can go and grab that information from a supplier point of view, grabbing that from the OEM in an automated way, and then collaborating that with your entire V team in real time. So technology allows you to reestablish your processes, but you got to have the culture and the leadership, the management, like Robert and Bill here, to adopt the technology, understand that they may not have all the answers, start a small project or program iteration so that you can see how it works, see how it changes your organizations, and maybe even rewrite the organization of some of your processes, or throw out some of the processes that you've thrown in. Because, former process guy, I love to say that a process is only good once, and then when you find that there's a gap or something missing in it, you end up throwing an additional process on top of a process, and you never go back and look at it. And so what you have is a lot of inefficiency built up over time. And that happens in software as well. What I liked about Eris coming to Microsoft, and what we chose with Eris, was getting rid of all of the traditional hardened 800-pound gorilla type software that were rigid around the process, and they made us as an organization work with their process of software rather than they working with us to integrate with the flexibility and the open. I love that, Bill, because I agree with it. And people don't know that Microsoft, 77% of Microsoft now is all open platform. We believe in it. Our new leadership believes in it. Our customers know that. They need that. So in order to have that rapid, agile change aspect, we have to be open. And so we're choosing partners like Eris to help us consolidate a lot of our behemoths into a more agile practice. And then as we're doing that, we're rewriting our processes through those V teams, again, one at a time. And then as they roll them up into their high performance managers, and the leadership takes a look at the processes that are coming out of some of these antiquated technologies consolidations, we're finding out that a lot of processes were the same. They were just added on over and over again. And we added yet a new tool because of a new process. So we've increased costs, we've increased complexity, we've increased workload on people. And now we're replacing that with automation, collaboration, consolidation of tools like Eris, with lower code and more flexibility for us to change as we find a new process or a lack of process. We can go back to Eris and say, hey, we need you to integrate with the next tool or the next code, so to speak, or importantly, integrate that with Teams and the HoloLens so that Ford can work collaboratively within one tool set across the entire change management platform.
What I would add to that is that I think, I'm not sure whether people in the audience are aware or not, Eris is the global backbone for all of Microsoft. We are the PLM, and through engineering and out to the supply chain for everything Microsoft makes, whether it's the HoloLenses or Surfaces or Xboxes, or it's the servers, networking, and storage that go into the Azure data centers, that's all designed, developed, built, sourced using Eris as the backbone. So we were the modernization initiative for all of, or digitalization for all of their, replacing all of their legacy PLM systems. There's a fair amount of organizational psychology that's involved in this as well, where figuring out how your engineers and your personnel think about accepting change has a big role to play. I mean, I just bring that up because I think about the work that we're doing at Airbus, from engineering through manufacturing and out through the supply chain. And I mean, they really took a very innovative approach to the way they did the project. Instead of saying to everybody, hey, we're putting in a new global system that's going to be the backbone for everything we do when we build aircraft, we're not going to rip out everything out of your cold, dead hands. They came about it the opposite way and said, we have a new flexible or agile way to go about digitalizing processes. If you have older automation technology in your department, come talk to IT, see if you qualify. We'll work with you to very quickly replicate what you're using today and improve the process. And by the way, we'll fund it. And that was kind of like,
Mark, I'm gonna have to stop you.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. I'm afraid we're out of time. I just want to thank all of you for your time today, for your comments. This has been very informative session, so I appreciate it, and thank you, everyone, and thank CAR MBS also for this. You know, I've attended this event many times. I'm sure a number of you on the panel and in the audience have attended this in the beautiful city of Traverse City, Michigan. Thank you, CAR MBS, for making it happen virtually. Thank you, and have a great day and enjoy the conference.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks.